Today we're here to hear about, we'll hear from one of our NHS entrepreneurial fellows called Dr. Tim Baker, and he'll be sharing with us details about one of his innovations, so his project, and he'll share with us the impact that that's making. So before we get to that, the housekeeping is that we've turned on the Zoom subtitle function again. It's not perfect, so forgive any odd words. So Tim will join us, talk through his project, and he's also got one of his colleagues with him. Once they've run through their project and we've had a bit of a chat, he will then, both of them would take part in a Q&A session. So I did mention that yesterday, if anyone joined us, we had supported a lot of COVID research with our funds raised during the emergency appeal. And today we're focusing on our innovation grants. So Addenbrooke's Charitable Trust tries to bridge the gap between the NHS and innovation. So we'll fund projects and hopefully encourage the uptake of those projects by the NHS. So COVID-19 meant that patients and their families, they couldn't communicate, those patients in hospital couldn't communicate with their families in a normal way. And staff were also searching for a way to communicate with their patients and their families. So communication became a huge issue. And so actually Tim and his colleagues, their app that they'd invented called myICUvoice absolutely came into its own. And we're super proud that we were able to take part and fund some of that project for them. So I'm going to hand over now to Tim, who'll talk us through that.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Bear with me a second, just while I get a presentation up on the screen, which should all be there now. There we go. So, myICUvoice is a project that's been running for a number of years now, but we used to have to explain a lot about intensive care prior to last year. It was a sort of hidden place in the hospital that not many people knew about it. Of course, everybody now knows. And the project is very much about looking at the person that is the patient rather than us just looking after patients. In healthcare, and we've seen this a lot in the last year, we're really driving for what we call personalized medicine, using cutting edge science, genomics, proteomics, artificial intelligence algorithms or machine learned algorithms to improve diagnostics and decision making, so that we can save as many lives as possible. But what does that really mean in ITU? Well, I think that the short version of it, we can save more lives. It means people are surviving their time in ITU. But that also means that, a bit like the sort of post-COVID syndrome that's spoken about, we've been talking for years about something called post-intensive care syndrome, and actually it's really pretty similar in its presentation. So we know a lot about the physical weaknesses and the problems that are associated with health and what we need to do about it. But we're really now starting to try and function on things like the cognitive dysfunction, the fact that after intensive care, your mind takes quite a long time to reorientate itself and be able to make basic decisions. But also that 1 in 4 patients that survive intensive care really suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder, something that we usually associate with the battlefield. And I think it actually, in many ways, it's not that surprising that that's common. Depression and anxiety are also rife, but we have to try and do something to make that better. And if you read the literature, doing anything as soon as possible is the most effective way for us to try and manage that. And unfortunately, sometimes we see patients coming back to the hospital for whom the experience is just so miserable that actually they say things like this, which is concerning and actually really bothers most people that in any way involved with it. So several years ago now, 2013, a patient focus group was set up in the intensive care unit in Cambridge by Vilas Navaperka, who you'll see in a second. And really the intention of that was to say, we know that you think we're great because we saved your life, but actually we don't care about that. What we want to know is how do we do things better? How can we be even better still? What was it like for you? And it was pretty clear that the sort of words that are bounded on the screen here were what the patients were describing of their time in the intensive care units. But they also said, you don't understand what it means to be a patient. Clinicians just don't understand. So Vilas got into a bed so that he could start to understand it, and actually very clearly describes the same sort of feelings and sensations that the patients had felt. And it meant that we went on to discover a spectrum of voicelessness. So patients have very complicated conditions, so that they often think that their symptoms that they're experiencing that day are less relevant for the clinical staff, or they find it difficult to be heard because they're wearing an oxygen mask, or actually the tiredness associated with critical illness means that it's very difficult to find even the simple words to describe problems that you've got. And then of course there's the not wanting to bother clinical staff. But also we've got a small subgroup of patients who are tracheostomized. They're on ventilators, but they're awake and they're orientated, but they're unable to talk because of the process of ventilation. And it's incredibly distressing for it. All the patients said that they wanted us to every day ask them a structured symptom survey so we could really start to understand the symptoms that they had. And at the time, it was difficult to believe that this was as significant a problem as it really is. But if you look at the literature, the most distressing part about an illness is when you're unable to effectively tell people what problems you're having. And as clinicians, we always overestimate our ability to understand what those problems are, and we usually underestimate the severity and frequency with which those symptoms occur. So I set about trying to fix this with the sort of the patients that were physically incapable of talking, and we came up with myICUvoice. And I'm going to swap screens here so that you can see how myICUvoice looks. So I just need to move a few things around and press play, and then hopefully you can see.
Patients in the ICU experience anxiety, fear, and uncertainty. For patients who are attached to ventilators, these symptoms are worsened because, although they are often alert and awake, they cannot speak. Research shows, even with current methods of communication, more than 25% of patients leave the ICU with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression. Lack of clear and thorough communication makes life difficult for both nurses and patients. myICUvoice is a new communication tool designed to help. It restores patients' fundamental ability to communicate and increases their mental and physical well-being. It also enables nurses to monitor each patient's symptoms and emotions in real time, allowing them to immediately understand and address issues, therefore reducing the distress that patients experience. From the myICUvoice homepage, the patient can choose from various ways to communicate. Where am I? Reassures the patient that they are being cared for in the ICU. The keyboard allows for independent expression. Communicate offers categorized, commonly needed statements. My Pain uses an anatomical diagram to pinpoint pain. And Most Used stores the patient's most frequent statements. Communication is so basic, and yet it is so vital to all of our well-being. Let's ensure that all patients continue to have a voice.
I'm just going to share back to my presentation screen again. Here we go. So what does this mean for individual patients? Well, having to use a piece of software is actually quite challenging. And so it stimulates the patient's cognitive abilities. We talked about the delayed cognitive return to normal brain function, the ability to make a cup of tea, the decision-making processes. The earlier we introduce something that exercises the brain to patients, the better it is for them. And of course, this is something that everybody engages with because it improves the connection that they've got with everybody around it, be it the nurses at the bedside or when we can have the relatives in the ITU. We can do that way. And that means, of course, means that patients have got more autonomy. We see them as individual people. And through this process, they become more and more motivated, which is wonderful. And it's so incredible to see this working. Now, earlier this year, because we'd been working on this for a while, and we'd been through multiple variations of it. So we had a tool that works very well for this subgroup of patients. So we were able to release it for free on the App Store. So ITUs across the country now have access to it for free, and they can use it whenever they want, and they are, which is fantastic. But again, what does this mean to individual people? And we've got a really nice story here that means that you can see exactly what it looks like. Let me just share this screen for you here. Minimize that one. In fact, I'm going to stop screen sharing and start again when I'm on the right page. In fact, here we go. It's always good when you're live. Here we are. Now, is that working? Claire, can you see the BBC page? No. Right, let me stop, restart. It's such a lovely story. I'm gonna persist with this just to see if we can get there. Are we there?
No.
No. Oh, we'll try again. We'll give it one more attempt. If it doesn't work, we'll move on. But it'll be worth it if we
Fingers
get
crossed. There we go.
There we go. Fantastic.
You're very good at this.
So we click this one, don't we? To reorientate yourself.
You are in intensive care after your operation.
Yeah.
Where is your pain? Low leg. I need a deep breath.
Carol, thank you so much for doing this, because I know you've just been through this enormous operation and you've only woken up this morning. It's incredible that you could do this for us, so thank you very much.
I'm busy today, lots of fun.
It's really nice that you can use humour, isn't it? It changes the way that we interact with them immediately. And especially if you couldn't talk because of that, it's so much more difficult for us to have those basic human interactions. For me, the humour side of it is what makes the biggest difference. What are the things that have surprised you that patients have said now they're actually able to have a voice?
I think we were all surprised at how many people were just thirsty. Just a really simple thing.
Same mood.
Lovely.
The iPad is a godsend. Felt like I couldn't breathe, but can say it here.
We make the best team.
Wonderful. I'm just going to stop it playing the next video. Okay, so back to the presentation again. Sorry, it's a little bit of chopping and changing here. But it's nice. It's nice. I just wanted to show everybody what it means for individual patients. And there's a whole nother component to this as well. We've seen that for individual patients, it works really, really well. But actually, is the tool really dealing with the proper issue that needs to be dealt with? And I think with myICUvoice, we're really able to start answering that. Research shows, and the data from myICUvoice, I'll talk about that in a second, shows that communication in the intensive care and many other areas of the hospital occurs when it's directed by clinicians. It's not often patient-led, and that's for a whole host of reasons. And when communication tools for patients that physically can't talk are available, they're only used about 50% of the time. So we've got a small subset of patients for whom we really need to start thinking about what we can do more for. Now, the advantage of myICUvoice being an app is it means that we can attach it to a database and start really looking at what happens. And we get really meaningful insights. So this is the average symptom burden of a community-acquired pneumonia, and it's very similar to the symptoms experienced for patients with COVID. You'll notice there are things here that if we don't know about, I feel like I'm drowning. As a clinician, that's something that's really important. I can do things to make that better, but there's no way that we'd ever guess that was the case with patients that couldn't talk, or often it's not something that you'd be able to find the words to say. Nikki in the video there said it was surprising how often patients were feeling thirsty. My mouth is dry is the most frequently reported symptom by intensive care patients. And we introduced synthetic saliva and had a really big drive to say, right, let's make this symptom better. And as you can see, 2 weeks later, it was almost non-existent. This is a word cloud. Just the size of the text relates to the frequency with which the symptoms occur. But actually, the bigger question is, does it continue to work? Now, we had a big drive. We introduced synthetic saliva, and you can argue about the quality of the data here, but it reduced dramatically. And then we stopped having the drive and stopped talking about continuously. And having a dry mouth, it is now still, despite the fact we've got some synthetic saliva available, the most frequently reported symptom that's there. So we really need to start thinking about how we change our behaviour to ensure that all patients with this spectrum of voicelessness are addressed. And when we were looking at the data, we realized that myICUvoice wasn't being used as much as it should be. And I questioned whether that was because of the technology or whether it was something else. And the only way that you can answer that isn't with data, but with a bit more complicated study. So this is where we had an anthropologist spend many months in the intensive care unit, understanding how people interact with technology and how people interact with each other, so we can really get to the grips of how we deal with this problem. Now, she discovered that myICUvoice is great for patients that can't talk. But she also described that only 1 in 25 nurses spontaneously reported any understanding of the spectrum of voicelessness that we've been trying to explain to them. And also that 60% of patients thought that we should do better in the intensive care to improve at the way that we interact with patients, or more importantly, how effectively we understand the symptoms that we need to address for them. And this is because the role of the nurse is complicated, and they're dealing with lots and lots of issues all of the time. And right at the heart is the patient, but there's such a balance of jobs, of tasks to make sure the patient stays alive, that we need to ensure that being patient-centric is the central focus of that. And so for that reason, we developed the nurse zone in the software. And I'm going to start sharing with you now a screen that allows you to see how we've adapted the software to ensure that not only do we detect symptoms, but we also treat them too. I think we've gone back to the same problem here. Let me try this. Again, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll come back to the screen share in a second so you can see it effectively. Here we go. Is that
In the
working?
myICUvoice app, enter the nurse zone by clicking the button on the bottom right of the patient homepage. The function you'll use the most often is the Symptoms to Address button on the top left. This will show all communications your patient has selected. As you treat symptoms, you can deselect the tiles, thereby removing them from the list. The nurse zone also offers a graph view of your patient's symptoms over time. By clicking either Survey Responses to see the results specifically from the survey, or Communication Responses to see all communications, you will see a graph highlighting particular symptoms that have been reported by your patient today. The graph also has a historical view which will indicate whether a particular symptom has been prevalent in the recent past. You can view similar trends in pain by looking at the patient's reported pain in both survey responses and communication responses. Clicking on a specific body part in the pain graphs will show you more detail about your patient's pain. By clicking Survey Detail, you will see detailed information on how your patient has responded to the question, "How is your mood?" You can slide the Today marker to see different timescales. If you think your patient would benefit from taking the patient symptom survey a second or third time throughout the day, you can re-access it from the nurse zone. You can also update and personalise the "Where am I" message that your patient sees from their homepage. Consider adding a detail that will bring about a peace of mind or a smile to your patient. Lastly, the nurse zone is also the space from which to access and change administrative settings. including switching to a different patient. Whenever you're finished in the nurse zone, re-enter the patient zone and return myICUvoice to your patient.
So building that part of the software, again, has really changed the way that we're able to use it, ensuring that we are every day focusing on what's really, really important for individual patients. It means that we can continuously review and improve the standards of care that we're providing for our patients. So, but more than monitoring the care standards, it means that we can also start helping nurses at the bedside improve the way that they interact with patients and ensure that they've got the best possible treatments. What I'm going to do now is log into the system that we use here. Now this is our overnight intensive recovery, or our post-anaesthetic care units. It's a small high dependency care unit that's closed on Saturdays, so I can show you the data without any confidentiality issues. So you can see there are no patients there today. They've all moved to other areas of the hospital. But in the last week, the patients that we have had have reported 112 different symptoms. And we know that we now know that we've treated 26 and acknowledged 70 of those. I'll explore that a little bit more in detail. So in the last week, the most frequently reported symptoms are a little bit like the story I've already told you. My mouth is dry, most frequently reported symptom, and I'm tired. Now, the nurses have been encouraged to say, I want a better treatment for symptoms. And when they do, they can use this system, except for now, because it seems to not be working. They'll click on the link and the link provides them with a whole host of different treatment options that they can provide. Tiredness is a very interesting one. After you've had major surgery, it's normal to be tired, but just because it's normal, does it mean it's acceptable? Traditionally, we've said yes, but noticing how frequently patients are reporting feeling tired, we're now proactively ensuring that patients have eye masks and earplugs to ensure that they've got really good sleep quality after their operation, something that's always a problem in the hospital. But we're also starting to ask more serious questions. 75% of the population are addicted to caffeine. You wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is you have a cup of tea and coffee. Do we provide coffee for patients after their operation? Can we provide coffee or caffeine for patients after their operation? We can definitely provide them caffeine. Sometimes we can provide them coffee. And actually that caffeine withdrawal, as most of you will know, is pretty miserable. So something really simple can make a big difference for patients. So there's all sorts of insight for all of the symptoms that we have that mean that we can really start driving the quality of care that we provide forwards for patients. A lot of this is really simple, but without the data, we're just not focusing on, not aware on issues that we really ought to be looking to try and address. Of course, the data then means that we've got some really interesting opportunities. So symptom disease networking, I mean, there's a whole world of opportunity for us to do there. So at the bedside, we can do something immediately. In the ward, we can do something to ensure that the care that we provide at a ward or a hospital level is continuing to improve. And then from a research perspective, we've got a data set that almost doesn't exist elsewhere, unique to us here in Cambridge. We can start to do all sorts of interesting things. And we can also start to use the same software for monitoring symptoms in different settings. We're hoping to start very soon a living-related kidney transplant process where we use the myICUvoice software for monitoring symptoms after their operations. Same with head and neck cancers, upper GI cancers. If we understand the symptoms every day for every moment of your hospital stay, there's a whole host of things that we can do to make your patient experience better. And if patients experience better, so too should outcomes be. It gives us a really unique insight. And then, of course, there's the function of improving communication as a symptom management tool with exceptional accessibility options rather than just a communication tool. In stroke care, we can probably start to do lots and lots of things. I think it's really important to mention that this isn't a fancy research project in medicine. And therefore, it's really, really difficult to get funding for it. The project doesn't save money for the hospital. It doesn't reduce length of stays. It doesn't change surgical outcomes. It just makes people feel better. And how do you fund making people feel better when money is tight for everything? Well, that's where ACT comes in. And that's where people like Katy come in. This project has only worked because of support from ACT and because of support from a host of volunteers who've got unique skills that they can bring along with them. Katy got involved with this when she was a medical student. And then when we needed to translate myICUvoice into multiple different languages, she ran away with this, took it to town, and has really become integrated into part of the myICUvoice team. And this project isn't possible with the support of everybody and the local communities in the same way that ACT is. So ACT, thank you very much for all of your help. Massively appreciated.
Tim, that's lovely. Thank you. I always find your clips hugely emotional. Everyone can sigh with relief now because Chris, our host, has joined us. So just before I hand over to you, Chris, and apologies if I've not done you justice prior, I just wanted to say if anyone has any questions for Tim and Katy, please use the Q&A function and we'll check those and go through those. So I'm now going to hand over to Chris. Thank you.
Very good. So first of all, my sincere apologies for joining late. I'd like to blame IT, but unfortunately it's operator error. So the problem's all mine. Thank you to Claire, who I guess picked up at the beginning, and I caught all the presentation. So a huge thank you then to Katy and to Tim. My name's Chris Rees. I'm the Vice Chair of the charity, and it's always a huge energizing delight when we see that the money we're able to support the hospital with is turned into something so positive, and something with the potential to do so much good across the whole of the NHS. So thank you so much for that. So we've got some questions which were sent in before the webinar, and if I run through those first, and then if the technology is working here, we can see if there's anything else. So first of all, there was a question, were speech and language therapists involved in developing the app?
Yeah, so we've had a huge number of different specialties involved with helping us develop this app. So from the outset, the speech and language therapists were kind of integrated into the core team in pushing this forward. But we've had everyone from nurses, doctors, speech and language, physio, all the way up to the anthropologist who did one of the big projects with us last year. So whilst this isn't really a communication tool per se, it has lots and lots of accessibility for the majority of our patients, and it's more about monitoring the symptoms that the patients experience and being able to act on those and establish what the patients are experiencing and how we can treat this and move it forward. Obviously, for some patients, it can act as a communication tool, and it has the communication function, which allows patients to type in if they're able to, but it also allows them to tell us what they're feeling and how they're feeling, and we can track this over time to see if things are improving or if they're getting worse, and we can improve it there. So the simple answer to the question is yes, speech and language therapists have been involved from the start and will continue to be involved as we push things forward with this.
Thanks, Katy.
Because Katy won't know this, but the first speech and language therapist we had involved pointed out that the early version, which was just a recording of my voice, was wholly inappropriate because I don't necessarily have the best voice for patients to pretend as their own.
Very good. And then another question then, how do you feel about artificial intelligence starting to play a more pivotal role in medicine today, positive or negative?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot to be said and a lot of benefits about artificial intelligence and helping with diagnosis and the biological side of medicine. But I guess what we're trying to do is something slightly different, and at the moment artificial intelligence probably isn't there to help that, which is treating the patient as a person and treating them individually with the symptoms they're experiencing. Artificial intelligence is obviously based on data and data recognition and pattern recognition, and the database and the software to assist with kind of patient symptoms doesn't exist. So this technology will be able to eventually help with that moving forward, but we're not there yet, and hopefully some of the data that myICUvoice can generate and support our patients with will be able to help with potential AI technology in the future, but not at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And then a question just come in from Keith, and he asks, can this software be used for enhancing communication outside a hospital environment?
Yes, I think so. Obviously, we've had people from in fact all over the world ask us about using myICUvoice. I can think of a particular person in Australia who was asking if they could use this for their mum who had recently had a stroke, and they were using it at home to communicate with her. So there is the scope and the ability to use this out of the hospital. It will at some point require a little bit more adaptation. At the moment, obviously, we've got the nurse zone and things like that, but it has been used relatively successfully out of hospital in a personal kind of environment with good feedback. It's available to everyone on the App Store, so they can download it and use it at home if they want. So yeah, I think there is the ability to use it outside. Right. I don't know what you think, Tim.
Yeah, if you go to www.myICUvoice.com on an iPad and click the link on the homepage there, you can get it and have a go. It works very well as a communication tool for people that struggle to find words in whatever reason. We've seen that time and time again. So in any context, it's there, it's free, it's available. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And then another question just come in. I was wondering if you've tested it as a communication tool with deaf people, hard of hearing, and or visually impaired patients. If not, could you consider using it for them as well?
Yeah, so we have thought about all of these kind of things. As you may have seen when we showed the interface, we've got both. When you click on one of the buttons, it comes up with, it says, I am happy or I am sad when you click on it, and you can unclick it. But equally, we've also got, for people who are deaf but are able to read, and we've got subtitles under each one and a picture that explains the feeling, the mood or symptom that they're experiencing. Obviously, we haven't got to the stage where we're able to do something for people who are both deaf and blind, but I'm sure in the future that's something we can consider. Yeah, I don't know, Tim.
Right, thank you. And then going back to when this all started, the app is extraordinary. It's extraordinarily successful. Was it a light bulb moment, or was it an evolution in terms of the germ of the idea turning into what we see today?
I'll take that one, Katie. I think that's probably more relevant for me. So the initial idea was basically asked for by patients. There was no light bulb in it. They were sitting down in a meeting, and it was very, very clear that we needed to do something. Maybe the light bulb moment was saying, well, if we're doing that, we should attach it to a database, and we should look at the data and make sure that it's being used effectively. By having data, a data system attached to it, means that we can really analyze how the app's used. We can understand what symptoms we need to address more frequently, and that the data system has evolved with time. Our understanding of the need to develop software not for patients but for nurses and patients is really key. And I think our our anthropologists really drove that home with us. The first version of myICUvoice was designed for patients, but patients need nurses with them in order to have access to that tool. It's got to work for both people. So the software has definitely evolved. It's evolved a lot over the last few years. It might look the same in many ways, but actually the functionality and the background stuff has changed a lot.
And then another question, in terms of recovery period for patients, have you been able to measure how much improvement in the patient's mental state? That was good, that wasn't me. I don't know where that's coming from. So I'll ask the question again to Tim and Katy. In terms of the app's effectiveness, have you been able to measure the improvement in patients' mental state through them being able to communicate easily and openly?
Whilst we haven't been able to have any kind of qualitative measure of this per se, we know that the app has been shown multiple times now to improve the kind of happiness of our patients. And happiness can actually improve motivation, and motivated patients generally get out of hospital quicker and have a quicker and easier generally recovery. So if we're able to use the app to the benefit of the patient's happiness, it will then have the kind of secondary effects of getting them out of hospital sooner and hopefully have longer term improvements in their overall psychological state.
Great. Okay, thank you very much indeed. And then in terms of the scope of this going forwards, I mean, an extraordinary amount of work has been done. This is an extraordinarily effective thing. How wide is the scope of it going forwards? How much more can we help the NHS by rolling this out further?
Chris, there is enormous scope for this, making it a huge difference, particularly with the data system that we've developed to go around it to really ensure to compare the effectiveness of symptom management in one hospital versus another, with one drug versus another. The potential there's enormous, let alone the difference at the bedside that we just time and time again hear from patients. Our limiting step, if I'm honest, is money. This is a project that isn't suitable for most funding calls. It makes people feel better. It allows us to monitor how effectively we're making people feel better. But it's not saving a life. It's not reducing a length of stay. It is incredibly difficult to get funding for this. So any help and support with that would make a huge difference. We've got interest for access to the data system from multiple hospitals across the UK. There's interest at an NHS level with this, but actually I've got to find a way that we can change what we have now and make it suitable for national rollout. That is a big project.
Fantastic. Okay, and I'm just, there's another question coming here from Elena. Do you need data scientists to help with the aggregated data?
It depends if Eleanor's a data scientist and she's offering. So we do have Marianne, who's wonderful and is a data scientist and helps us with lots of it, designing the data structure at the background and doing some of our analytics. There are always projects in the hospital that need data scientists. There are so many projects that could be helped with data scientists. If she's interested, she should get in contact.
Very good. So Elena, there you are, huge opportunity to help this extraordinary project. And then looking forwards, how challenging is it if you want to add more languages to the app?
So Katy maybe can answer that one to start with, and then I'll answer the technical side.
Language-wise, we had a big drive during the first lockdown where we actually managed to get 13 languages up and running from volunteers across the globe. Actually, multiple volunteers in multiple languages have got this running for us and set up It's been used in a hospital in France. We've had some interest from people using it in Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, as well as lots of hospitals asking for use in this country for a whole variety of languages. So we, off the top of my head, I probably won't be able to list the 12 or 13 languages that we've got, but we do have French, German, Spanish, Polish, Arabic is there. I've got a Welsh version, but unfortunately yeah, that's our Arabic. We've got a Welsh version, but unfortunately the Apple software doesn't work with the Welsh version because Welsh isn't a globally recognised language. So that's six there, and we're still working with people as they're able to bring some more languages to the forefront for use. As and when required, but this has been a kind of mammoth effort from about 80 volunteers across the world to help us with this. So it's been fantastic.
Fantastic, and I'll volunteer to find you a Welsh volunteer with a surname like Rees. That's where I came from, so we can find someone to help with.
Oh, the Welsh version's ready to go. It's the Apple software that
Yeah, we need Apple to acknowledge Welsh as a formal language. That's the underlying problem. It's to do with us.
And then actually online now we've got some offers of help with the data management. So that's come back in from somebody that's on the call. So that's brilliant. So thank you very much, Elena. That's terrific. Very good. So I think we've gone through all the questions there. An extraordinary presentation reflecting the extraordinary achievements that have been made. And one of the exciting things about being a trustee with the Addenbrooke Charitable Trust is the breadth of help that we can give to the hospital. Everything from stuff for the wards for patient comfort, right through to cutting edge and innovative technology for patients like this. I think in terms of the way forwards, this is absolutely extraordinary. It's brilliant that our supporters have been able to help us, to help you to get this done, and in turn the multiplier effect that we can get from it across the NHS. So first of all, to thank our volunteers and our supporters who continue to be the backbone of the charity. They are so much a part of what we do and the partnership with the hospital. We're getting some extraordinary positive comments back from people who are on the webinar, so I won't share all of those, but absolutely people have enormously enjoyed. I'll just pick out one here. So thank you so much for the talk. So fascinating, amazing benefits. Thank you for all you are doing to help patients. So I'd like to echo that as well. So this has been extraordinary. You've shared it in a way that the layman can understand and appreciate, for which we are extremely grateful. So on behalf of all of us at Addenbrooke's Charitable Trust, a huge thank you to you, Tim, and to you, Katy, for an extraordinary job well done. So thanks to you, and thanks for everyone that's been with us on the webinar today. So have a great Easter weekend. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.